InvestorIdeas.com Podcasts.
Good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of InvestorIdeas.com Podcasts. In today's podcast, going to be looking at a few public company announcements from Lowell Farms Incorporated, trading on the CSE as LOWL and the OTCQX as LOWLF. Also looking at Pure Extracts Technologies Corporation, trading on the CSE as PUL and the OTC as PRXTF. The VLNS Company Incorporated, trading on the TSX as VLNS and the OTCQX as VLNCF. And lastly, looking at Australis Capital Incorporated, trading on the CSE as AUSA and the OTC as AUSAF. So first today, starting with Lowell Farms Incorporated, who has completed its previously announced corporate name change following the acquisition by Indus Holdings Incorporated of Lowell Farms. Now the combined company is now operating under the Lowell Farms Incorporated name. The company's subordinate voting shares and warrants are now trading on the Canadian Securities Exchange under the ticker symbols LOWL and LOWL.WT, and the subordinate voting shares are now trading on the OTCQX under the ticker symbol LOWLWF. Now, we're hard at work pairing up the best brand in cannabis with unparalleled production capabilities, says Lowell Farms Chairman George Allen. By combining Indus infrastructure and the capabilities with Lowell's brand leadership, we are building a business that has no equal in cannabis. Adds Lowell Farms Chief Executive Officer Mark Ainsworth. Now, the integration of Lowell products into a distribution network has already begun to show positive results, and we're scaling operations to meet the demand for our marquee products. We now control our own destiny and look forward to a better showcasing the strength of our company in 2021 and beyond. So this combined entity now operating under Lowell Farms, obviously kind of getting the best of both worlds, definitely looking at making a large impact in the California cannabis market, and really expecting to sort of overtake that market, or at least have a significant footprint of it over the next year. And we'll see how they start to expand in that market, and then if they start to go into other states as well. And again, this does follow sort of the trend we're going to be seeing for the next year or so. As many of these companies anticipate legalization changes within the U.S., you're seeing lots of acquisitions and partnerships, and really just a lot of these companies combining and consolidating in anticipation of a much larger and more aggressive market, and also in anticipation of the large amount of flow of capital that will become available. For instance, if they pass the Safe Banking Act, a lot of these companies, there is still a bit of a fear of obviously large-scale corporations coming in and just sort of buying up everything that's been available. And obviously, if these companies do not have sort of the finances and operational abilities behind them by this point, once this large capital comes into the industry, a lot of them will sort of fall by the wayside and not be able to compete as aggressively in the same markets. Next, looking at Pure Extracts Technologies Corporation, who announced it signed a letter of intent with Shroom Bloom to enter into an agreement for the supply of psychedelic mushroom biomass. Now, Shroom Bloom is a BC-based mushroom cultivator whose unique growing method uses a sustainable forest product to grow organic psilocybin auzurescens mushrooms, also known as azures, and they are native to BC and are one of the most potent psilocybin mushrooms that have been found. Now, azures contain up to 1.8% psilocybin and 0.5% psilocin, and 0.4% baeocystin by dry weight, which is nearly 3 times more than the more common psilocybe cubensis mushrooms. Shroom Bloom is currently conducting a biotech research and development program utilizing artificial intelligence to industrialize the cultivation of psychedelic mushrooms, and their goal is to become the global leader in the production of psilocybin mushrooms. Now, under the terms of the letter of intent, Pure Extracts would be a preferential access to Shroom Bloom's crop of psychedelic mushrooms and would get the most favored nation pricing. The letter of intent is subject to both Shroom Bloom and Pure Extracts holding dealers' licenses under the Controlled Drug and Substances Act, or the CDSA. Pure Extracts CEO Ben Nikolevsky remarked, "A supply agreement with a world-class cultivator like Shroom Bloom would ensure a reliable source of high-quality, high-potency psychedelic mushroom biomass for our extraction facilities, so that way we can produce plenty of psilocybin for our formulation and R&D activities and for any resulting clinical trials." So hopefully that partnership will go through, and that will be doable. Obviously, a big part of that is getting the dealer's license for both Pure Extracts and for Shroom Bloom. Again, it does seem like, as far as the psilocybin industry is concerned, that Canada has been pretty, I don't want to say lenient, but at least not overly conservative with the granting of licenses. It seems to be not as slow and sort of plodding of a progress as it has been with the cannabis industry. Obviously, there's not as many companies in that same sector right now, so a lot of them are just focusing on the R&D, but there are a few companies that are really getting aggressive about production and cultivation methodology. I do think that you're going to see a lot of sort of similarities between the cannabis industry, where companies are already avoiding vertical integration as sort of their business policy right out of the gate, as they've seen how much that slowed down progress in the cannabis industry. Obviously, there were some companies that really benefited from that methodology, but for a lot of them, they realized the benefits of being sort of a niche extractor or a niche producer or a niche cultivator, or really just focusing on one key element of the industry as opposed to trying to do it all in one source in-house. So I do think that for pure extracts, obviously focusing on the extraction side of things, they'll be similar to a VLNS in some way in the cannabis industry. And Shroom Bloom obviously seems to be ahead of the game with some of their cultivation methods. I'd be very interested to know if a lot of these companies are just going to be working with single strains. Most of them seem to be focused on just one or two right now, but there are a few companies that are the exceptions that are focusing on multiple cultivation methods of a large number of strains. I do think that is the method that needs to be adopted right now, especially just to get that initial data set. To understand the real differences between some of those strains when you're looking at it for clinical use. Again, there's most of this industry is still based off of anecdotal evidence. There is obviously lots of great psilocybin medical evidence out there, but even still, it's not extremely strain specific, and a lot of it is even from artificial psilocybin. So I do think that there will be a need to have the data accessible for different strain cultivation methods, but I think that you're going to see more and more partnerships similar to what Pure Extracts and Shroom Bloom are doing right now, where you're having a cultivator and an extract company combining their efforts, and eventually there will be other elements of that industry as well that will need to be combined into the same entity. Next, looking at the Valens Company Incorporated, who announced the closing of its previously announced acquisition of all the issued and outstanding shares of Lift Food Technologies Incorporated. The cash share transaction totaled 24.9 million Canadian, plus approximately 17.5 million in post-closing consideration, subject to achieving certain earn-out EBITDA milestones. Now, Tyler Robson, the chief executive and co-founder and chair of the Valens Company, said, "We're incredibly excited to officially welcome Lift to the Valens family, which will undoubtedly strengthen our manufacturing leadership position given their confectionery expertise and broad network of partners and retailers." Now, the closing of the Lift acquisition and the addition of the leading edibles platform signifies the completion of a key milestone in our strategy to drive SKU growth in the new product categories and maximize market share gains across the country. We've already begun diversifying our product offering with the launch of various soft chews manufactured in Lift's facility, and we have a strong pipeline of new innovative edible products we believe will increase both quality and variety in existing edible segments in Canada today. Now, Paulo Pero and Matthew Amato, co-founders of Lift, said that we are ready to hit the ground running with Valens' team as a unified manufacturing force in the Canadian recreational market. Our shared passion for putting consumers at the forefront of product development, formulation, and commercialization will be demonstrated as we begin rolling out various edible products that the Canadian market has never seen before. So with the addition of the Lift facility, the company now has the capability to produce a wide range of edible products in various formats and dosages as part of its central platform. And the added product development and manufacturing flexibility makes the platform easily adaptable to evolving consumer preferences and changing market regulations around the edible products as Valens looks to expand both in Canada and globally. Now, in the first quarter of 2021, Valens and Lift launched edible products with shared partners A1 Cannabis Co. and Verse Cannabis. And in partnership with A1, Lift launched the Summit Wild Berry Soft Chews made with real fruit juice, no added flavors or colors, and 5 milligrams of THC per soft chew. And additionally, with Verse Cannabis, launched the Verse Soft Chews, which is a new line of edible formulations and unique flavors at a great value. Now, the new product lineup includes Verse Baked Apple Soft Chews, which are infused with flavors of green apple and cinnamon, offering a tart, meat, sweet flavor bite, and Verse Sour Medley, which is a variety of 5 sweet and sour flavors, including green apple, raspberry, watermelon, pineapple, and cherry. Now, the Valens Company expects to ramp up shipments of edible products to provincial retailers in the coming weeks, including existing SKUs such as Citizen Stash Strawberry Mac, gummies from Lift's white label agreement with Experian Biotechnologies, and in the second quarter of fiscal 2021, the company intends to launch an assortment of unique consumer-driven edible products into the market. and their first launch will be going into BC and Ontario within the next couple of weeks, and then following into Alberta. So I've talked about this before the acquisition was complete, and again, now that it is complete, I think this is going to give VLNS an even bigger leg up in the Cannabis 2.0 category, which again, they've continued to be sort of the go-to for many of these companies in launching and perfecting certain Cannabis 2.0 products. Now that they have the expertise of their own edibles facility, that's obviously going to ramp things up quite aggressively. The edibles market continues to grow pretty aggressively in the Canadian market and globally. And I do think that the soft chew gummies will always be a pretty high selling SKU for the edibles category. It'll be interesting to see what changes over the next year or so and what the Cannabis 3.0 sort of products are going to be and how that will be different. Obviously, the big thing that a lot of these companies are still working towards, which we haven't really seen on the market yet, has been increased onset time, increased or the option to actually have a set offset time, increased bioavailability, different formats, different flavors. Obviously, they're going to be focusing on some health beneficial flavors and sort of formats where you're going to have probably gluten-free, vegan, no artificial flavors, etc. And then obviously ones that are more standardized. But it'll be interesting to see what they can come up with and also how these products are received over the next coming months in BC, Alberta, and Ontario. And lastly, today looking at Australis Capital, who announced that further to its press release dated January 5th and February 24th, the company has now completed the acquisition of 51% ownership interest in ALPS for the initial consideration of $10 million in shares and the company in a cash of $2 million. So with the transaction comes the option for AUSA to acquire the remaining 49% of the terms summarized in the company's January 5th press release, and one of the conditions of the transaction is that Mr. Terry Booth has been appointed to the company's CEO effective immediately, and Mr. Terry Booth has also been appointed to AUSA Board of Directors. Now with the transaction, AUSA is acquiring major interest in ALPS, the global leader in facility design, construction management, and post-commissioning services to the horticultural sector across a wide variety of commercial crops, including cannabis, fruits, vegetables, mushrooms, and ornamentals. And ALPS is now a foundational piece in the company's unique expansion strategy. So Terry Booth, the new appointed CEO, stated that with the completion of ALPS transaction, AUSA has now been transformed into a revenue-generating company with a difficult-to-imitate multi-state expansion strategy in the U.S. cannabis market. This transaction puts AUSA in a position where it can pursue novel streaming deals to fuel the scaling up of its high-quality brands across the nation, while delivering a de-risked income stream from a diversified services portfolio. We made a number of promises to our shareholders, and we are delivering on these rapidly, and I look forward to continuing a high-frequency dialogue with our stakeholders as we continue to execute and grow the company. Ignite, excite, and delight our shareholders and customers is not a common phrase, and it is our focus, it is our mission, and it is our global and noble vision indeed. So, AUSA, lots of benefits from that acquisition of ALPS. Again, that does give them sort of a de-risked revenue stream, which will allow them to continue expansion in the U.S., obviously allow them to focus on their premium brands and expand those brand offerings, and also, again, have a little bit more consistency for their financials, which is very beneficial in this industry right now. And now having Terry Booth attached to it, it'll be interesting to see how that gets perceived. I'm going to assume most people would be pretty excited about that. He is a good name within the cannabis industry, did well with Aurora Cannabis, and again, doesn't really get talked down about too often. So I think that as well will also be beneficial for investor sentiment towards AUSA. And it'll be interesting to see how the next year works for them and how this acquisition starts turning into revenue for them, as well as what they're able to focus on because of that increased revenue driver. That's all for today's podcast. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. That's all for today's podcast. Podcast is now a certified word trademark on the blockchain through Cognate Incorporated CM certification. InvestorIdeas.com podcasts are also available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and TuneIn. If you'd like to be a guest or sponsor of this podcast, please contact InvestorIdeas.com. Investor Ideas reminds all listeners to read our disclaimers and disclosures on the InvestorIdeas.com website, and this podcast is not an endorsement to buy products or services or securities. Investors are reminded that all investments involve risk and possible loss of investment. Investor Ideas does not condone the use of cannabis except where permissible by law. Our site does not possess, distribute, or sell cannabis products.